Welcome back, everybody, from this morning. We had quite a nice heavy duty medical program there this morning, and we finished off with the exercise, and so we're just coming back from our lunch break now, and we hope to be finished about 3:30, I would say. So that brings me to the first speaker. It's Shanali Perera. I met Shanali last year through Vifor Pharmaceuticals, who are running the initiative See Me, Hear Me. That was, if you were on last night, we had Dajana from Switzerland, who was leading on that initiative with Vifor Pharmaceuticals. And she showed us the video on the making of the initiative. And the initiative is about using art, expressing your disease through art. Shanali has done that in particular for patients with vasculitis. And it's a really interesting, lovely concept. And I think it links quite nicely with, if you were on last night, we had the psychologist Porrick Dunn talking about the impacts of chronic long-term illness, autoimmune conditions in particular, and he talked about acceptance. And I think that Shanali shows how this may be her work, maybe an avenue that, we can explore, and just a way of bringing ourselves to that point of acceptance as well on our journeys. So Shanali, I'll leave it over to you.
Thanks, Patricia. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Greetings from Manchester. I'm really thrilled to be here. So thank you for inviting me to your conference. And I'm a digital artist, educator, retired clinician, and most importantly, a vasculitis patient myself. And I'm thankful for this opportunity to share with you my personal experience with self-expression and the use of color to capture the invisible. Vasculitis affects my hand function and mobility, amongst other things, and I've been using an app on my phone to create art to cope with the illness, all the changes that came with it, and literally just to cope with the whole experience. But before I move on, I wanted to share something Aristotle said that bears weight on what I'll be talking to you about. The aim of art is to represent not the outward appearance of things, but their inward significance. So hold on to that thought. When it comes to creative expression, I think it has undeniable power. There is something about creativity, how we engage with it and share it with others, that has an impact on our health. And I think it can provide valuable insights into what it means to be human. Art really helps me to see and tell my story from a deeper place of understanding. So I thought first I'll give you a snapshot of my personal journey using art to transform my illness experience into a more meaningful way of living, moving from a clinician to a patient, and share my perspectives as a patient as well as a clinician, exploring art and the human factor, and touch on how we could perhaps use art to modify our lifestyle. Given that so much of the human experience around illness is steeped in emotion and complexity, the whole focus of my art is on our understanding of identity, art, and illness. I'm using my story as a starting point while I share a few personally resonant images to invite a collective understanding of how people make sense of key life experiences and what it means to them. The start of my journey was when I was specializing in rheumatology in Birmingham, thinking, I'm on the fast lane, thought I was just going on moving ahead, then suddenly everything came to a halt when I was at crossroads and embarked on an unexpected journey by becoming a patient in my own specialty of training, which was both a humbling and transformative experience personally and professionally. Numerous A&E, hospital admissions, multiple consultations with a variety of different specialties and disciplines gave me valuable insights into what the patient journey is really like. To face everyday struggles that patients face seems somewhat different when I sat on the opposite side of the desk for the first time. Until then, diagnosing, investigating, managing a condition was more of a black and white reality for me, but going through the journey of a patient, that experience is a reality with many shades of gray, and you're dealing with so many changes, and you're trying to balance this whole coping, adapting, adjusting versus controlling the whole disease process. I know, apologies, this is a very busy slide, but it's just to show, certain things that you are coping with, certain things you're adapting to and adjusting to. And for me, this sort of illustrates the challenges I started to face from the very beginning. It was not just going through the physical element, it was dealing with multiple layers all at once. It's like having 10 different screens on your laptop open and you don't have a how to deal with it user guide. The emotional elements, stuff at work, social elements, dynamics with relationships, stuff going on in the house. I felt really powerless and could not control the direction my life was heading. And the day I had to give up my career and take on ill health retirement, I felt robbed. All my dreams and expectations just gone out of the window. And I felt quite lost, really. I could not keep up with my friends, my peers, everyone around me, and it felt really isolating, and I felt vulnerable and left behind, subjected to all sorts of social expectations and pressures. But mostly the illness really took over me. Shanali, the person, was gone. It was all about Shanali, the illness, and it distorted my image and identity, who I stood for. How I got on top of this whole battle was actually through the creative process. I could not control the direction my life was heading. I could not control how the illness was evolving, nor my symptoms. As Dr. Dunn said yesterday, last evening, there are certain things you can control, there's certain things you can't. And I realized I could, however, control what I draw. And that certainly gave me a sense of purpose, a sense of achievement, and helped me to focus on what I can do versus what I can't, and helped me to regain some level of control, which I had felt I'd lost. And that certainly was the turning point for me to move forward with my life. And it was almost like a reboot, really, learning to walk past all the standards my pre-ill self had set for me, and defining a newer version of myself. It wasn't as easy as it sounds. It took years, and I had to have a lot of discussions with myself. But certainly the whole creative process helped me to do that, because art was not just a tool to express, it was also a tool for positive reinforcement and reflective thinking. according to Picasso, art washes away from the soul the dust of everyday life. So moving on to what my art is about, I'm trying to make the invisible visible when it comes to all those hidden struggles and challenges that people faced with during their lived experience, giving insights into things that we find very difficult to sometimes put into words, and how vulnerability and isolation affects us all, trying to sort of give the bigger picture for everyone to see it beyond the physical illness, everything else that is part and parcel of someone's journey going through a long-term condition. I use the digital medium to draw. I'll come to that in a bit. Coming to the concept of my work, I am trying to capture and represent my personal experience, as I mentioned before, and I use color as a method to document my observations and portray the different energies surrounding pain, fatigue, and everyday, day-to-day challenges living with an illness, to try and attempt to objectify the subjective. Illness is the subjective component and describes the patient's experience of the disease. Pain, change, these are all subjective. Our individual experiences and perceptions of it, how we connect with it, inwardly and outwardly, varies from person to person. So my own relationship with the illness, pain, change as a concept as well as a process, how it makes me act and feel, prompted me to explore this further with my art, concentrating on all these different invisible feelings and emotions. I'm going to pause for a second and ask you, I've mentioned that I'm trying to capture different energies with color. So at this point, I invite everyone to come up with what color comes to your mind when you think of change, and why that color. And if you don't mind using the chat box to type it in, we will pick it up a bit later on. Okay. And so what my art is really, it's my take on expressing the whole mind as well as the body experience of anticipation, uncertainty, challenges, concerns, all those effects on life that accompany the illness trajectory. How does it look like? How does it feel like as a bodily experience? So I'm trying to visually capture all these embodied feelings and illustrate in the body. Now, certain people do this outside the body, but in my practice, I've been concentrating on putting all those in the body. And just to give visibility and voice to the whole human aspect of illness, the whole calm, storm, and the in-between of the lived experience, as most of you could relate. So I sort of drawing on the last two slides, that is actually the human concept, the patient's perspective of illness. So I'm trying to combine that with the whole disease process, which is the biomedical perspective, and come up with the art concept, which is actually the embodied perspective that captures our human spirit and resilience, as well as physiological, psychological, the flexibility, with our emotions and all the other processes, and the sort of ongoing continuity and flow to maintain balance within and balance outside. So almost our inner reality with the illness as well as the outer reality with fatigue and pain, etc. So trying to bring the art, medicine, and human experience together. I will, at the end, ask what your thoughts are on this. And when it comes to color and form, colors, of course, symbolize different energies, as I mentioned, and the different color fields, and you see sometimes I've used color filters. They try to give you variations of fluctuations in emotions, pain, intensity, etc. And the concentric lines, you probably notice that most of my figurative drawings have concentric lines, and I'm trying to, that's something that I had started to do very unconsciously, but I think when I think about it, it actually is about movement, complexity, and I do have problems with my mobility and hand function, and in a lot of drawings I've got these concentric rings around the hip, the shoulder, the ankle joint, and again perhaps that's subconsciously me thinking about the complexity and movement, the posturing of the different bodies, and how they're positioned, again sort of shows the level of pain or support that's being offered. You will notice a lot of the time the heads are bent downward, and again that's something that I had very unconsciously done, and this is all up to your own interpretation, so you might have other opinions about why I've done certain things. And if we do have time, I'd love to hear that later on. Okay, so in the beginning, I said I've used art to transform my illness experience. And how did I do that? So firstly, I used, it helped me to understand what I was going through, cope with what I was going through, accept the whole situation, and also it was helpful to communicate as well as empower myself. So when it comes to understanding, by drawing what pain looked like to me, it helped me to understand what's going on with me, how pain affects me, how do I perceive it, how it's impacting my lifestyle. And not just pain, also you could see how diverse the spectrum of color is, and similarly emotions are the same. In a day we could experience all these mood changes, so it's just trying to actually capture it and see it helped me to get a better idea of what's going on. And when it comes to coping, taking the focus away from things like pain and fatigue helped me, even for a few minutes. Just that distraction helped me to manage them better on a day-to-day basis. And as part of coping with the illness, learning to accept becomes the next step. And again, Dr. Dunn was talking about this yesterday. And for me, learning to accept my new circumstances and understanding the limitations that I would have to face in my new reality was key to moving forward. Illness makes you a different person. Who you were has now transformed into who you have become, a new person with added personality, the illness. So holding on to who I was before is not only impossible, but it's also limiting. And if I didn't accept this and reject this different person, I would be stuck in a tiresome, repetitive cycle, stagnating in one place. And this is just to illustrate that whole acceptance and working around my limitations. And at this point, the Greek philosopher, what the Greek philosopher Heraclitus said comes to mind, because he said, no man ever steps in the same river twice, for it's not the same river and he's not the same man. Where he describes everything around us and within us undergoes this constant process of change, reminding us of the notion that change is one of those things that are constant, is the only thing that is constant in our universe. So even though it was extremely frustrating at first, I had to embrace this different person I had become. As I mentioned, it was key for me to move forward. With all the medication and other therapies that I was getting, it was, at one point I was still stuck in a rut. So I needed to move forward by accepting this is what's going on, and it meant revising my priorities. And I, from a clinician, I had become something in between a clinician and a patient, then a patient, and then I became a digital artist. And sort of that whole revising and changing my role, and what's really important to me now, accommodating my new lifestyle, and accepting the limitations of my altered existence. And this sort of illustrates the relationship between the work of being a patient and all the connections that we have to make with friends, family, and health providers, etc. When it comes to communication, certainly being able to show people what you're going through, again, friends, family, health teams, certainly can help them to get newer insights into what the lived experience really looks like, and perhaps get a better understanding. And of course, it gave me a chance to also document the impact the illness had on me. And similarly, connecting with everyone around me, despite, fatigue or pain or whatever other challenges I was going through, certainly, and sharing what I was going through certainly can help them, again, get a better understanding of what, or the bigger picture I was talking about, that sometimes people don't really know, because a lot of the time, with certain conditions and invisible conditions, you tend to look well. So people don't always see you at your worst, or they don't see you throughout the day. So their understanding of what the lived experience is like can be limited. And by sharing all this, perhaps they can change attitudes and perceptions, as well as challenge existing stereotypes and stigma around illness. So to use art to find meaning to what I'm going through, and purpose in sharing it with others, and being able to somewhat cope with my lived experience is empowering. But it's certainly empowering to have self-directed creations when most of the time the illness is trying to disempower me. And as I mentioned before, art can be more than a form of expression. It's also a way of thinking, and it can certainly empower people to better adapt to challenging situations. And to briefly touch on the digital medium, the reason why I use the digital medium is that if I continue to use my hands on repeated movement, and they become numbed and painful, so I have to stop every few minutes. So using traditional methods, I can use them, but it's quite a difficult task. So the digital medium was my ideal adaptation because it's light touch and I can alternate hands, and certainly there was less pain and fatigue in my hands when I used the digital app. So this sort of newfound freedom allowed me to explore myself in the world of color, which gave rise to my present work. So given what I've said so far in relation to nonverbal communication, I thought this was an interesting quote to share with you. Art is not what you see, it is what you make others see, said the French artist Degas. Right. A lot of the time, we forget to extract the positives from negative situations. And I just put this up just to remind ourselves that even in the most negative of situations, there are positives that we could take from that situation. And a lot of the time, when you go through challenging situations, humor sort of goes out of the window and you forget or you don't acknowledge it. And I think it's very important not to forget the fun factor. I'd forgotten it in the initial stages, and I'm sharing with you some very silly artwork I did just to remind myself to laugh and to continue to maintain that fun factor in my life. And of course, I've shared various quotations by different people, but according to Shanali, art adds color and perspective when skies are gray. So I thought I'd share that as well. Okay, coming to the topic of potential therapeutic benefits by engaging in the arts. I think exploring creative arts can be more widely considered, and there is lots of evidence to support its use in integrating it as part of self-management in long-term conditions. This is just a diagram that summarizes things that I have said so far, just to sort of give you an idea how art can be helpful in taking the focus away from illness, exploring yourself further, and also as a journal, as a visual journal. Sometimes it might be difficult to write things down, but you could, draw a color, smiley shape, or how things have been over a period of time, and it can certainly be helpful. That's something I had done that was useful for me. And of course, the whole fun factor business. Right, so what do we know so far about creative expression and self-expression? Creative expression and self-exploration. Speaking of arts and healing, the whole practice dates back to about 40,000 years. So for centuries, across civilizations and cultures, we've been using creative expression as part of healing ritual to free up the energy for healing to take place. Of course, over time, people started to associate it with magic and started to question it. So the practice got slowly, people stopped using that practice, but it's now come back in. And what really I wanted to share with you was the creation of circular designs. Now, if I asked you all to doodle something, I think most of you, not all of you, most of you would automatically do the doodling or scribbling in a circular motion. And that fascinated me purely because I've been drawing circular stuff. And when I looked into it, this creation of circular, repetitive, symmetrical designs have been part of our civilization. And Carl Jung, who was one of the founders of depth psychology and credited for connecting coloring and relaxation, thought that drawing these symmetrical, repetitive designs was something actually very calming to our brain. And that's perhaps why sometimes we subconsciously draw these circular designs. And just to give you an example, these are mandalas that the Tibetan monks draw as part of their meditation practice. I had to sneak this in for anyone who's been a House of Cards fan. This was a group of Tibetan monks doing a mandala in the White House. So I thought I'll share that. Okay, so as we are in the topic of the brain, I just thought I'll mention a couple of things. So when we are creating something, when we are drawing something, we use both sides of the brain, but of course the right is your creative side, and the left is for color and logic of where to put which color, but right side of the brain is responsible for you creating your artwork. But not only you're using both sides of the brain, but you're using various parts of your brain, parts that are responsible for vision, for memory, for fine motor skills, etc. So it's almost like a factory floor, lots of things happening at once, and this releases certain substances that bring about relaxation and mindfulness, etc. So not only what you produce is important, but this whole biopsychosocial process that is involved in creating something leads to the reduction of anxiety and stress, and thereby it can certainly be a positive, or it could be a catalyst for healing. The second thing about the brain is that the right side of your brain processes your pain perception, etc. So when you are going through pain, if you also start to draw something, so you're visualizing and you're trying to come up with your creation, that certainly takes the focus away from the pain, and it distracts the brain from pain. So yesterday, I think again, Dr. Dunn mentioned about neuroplasticity, about rewiring your brain when during certain injuries, etc. So for this rewiring process, if you for your brain to get rewired, it needs certain stimuli to rehabilitate, and you can actually count creativity as one of these stimuli as well. So I just thought I'll share that interesting fact with you. And just very briefly, I won't bore you with research, but it was just to very quickly show there aren't randomized controlled trials, but there are many studies. A lot of them are quantitative studies, but done in different groups of patients that show that engaging in creative activity, these are examples of visual art, of course, and engaging in drawing can certainly have a positive impact in mood, your certain physiology, body physiology, lowering your blood pressure, etc., and reductions in pain and fatigue. But of interest, this is one of the first studies that was done to draw your illness. And here it was mostly, I think it was all women. There were 32 women who were participating in the study. They had heart disease, and they were asked to draw their interpretation of what the heart disease was like, and they said by doing that it helped them to understand that condition better. And another study, again looking at people, the participants of people with long-term various types of chronic illness, not one particular group. So they said that art helped them to fill occupational voids and maintain a positive identity. What really struck me was one person said it was a lifestyle coat hanger. And this is from my own experience, actually, using art as a part of reflection, to bring about mindfulness, as well as a self-management tool with my illness, and modify my lifestyle on top of other medications and therapies that I take. And I just wanted to highlight that a lot of the time, when people go through illness, addressing just the mental or physical aspect is not enough. Because we talk a lot about holistic care, and there are many elements that make us, and sometimes we don't address all those elements. So I think using a tool like art can help to deal with some of those elements that also need considering. And it can be something that is not only helpful, but also enjoyable. And this was very briefly to touch on the fact when we talk about well-being, again, it's that same, we don't address all the elements, and it's just to bear that in mind, that it's not just the physical or the emotional, but the spiritual, cultural, social, all these elements are part of us. And of course, when it comes to creativity, there is no one recipe. I apologize, I haven't put gardening or cooking, but I think those are also things that are creative, and it could be any form of creativity that you can be involved in. And I think engaging in it, you can either observe it, so you can view art. If you don't want to draw art, viewing art is also engaging in the visual arts. So just by observing art can help you relax, because we don't always take time to pause. So if you go to an art gallery and stop in front of a painting, you are forced to pause and look at it and think about it, and that action alone can certainly help you to relax. There has been a study that looked at activities that evoke awe-inspiring activities, and they found that IL-6, which is an inflammatory marker, it was in people who had various inflammatory conditions. If they looked at something that was awe-inspiring, some of the inflammation levels were reduced. So that's interesting there. I think they're looking at this further with new studies. And coming to be the change, regaining a sense of control becomes a significant component in managing a long-term condition. So having a tool such as art or any form of tool can certainly help with combating day-to-day challenges on top of other medications and therapies, as I mentioned before. So finding that outlet, be it anything, as I said, gardening, cooking, writing, dance, anything, can certainly help with dealing with situations better. Right, so moving on to what I want to achieve with my art. Basically, I just want to start more conversations and show people the bigger picture about the hidden aspects in with long-term conditions and the impact it can have on image identity, touch on stereotyping and stigma, but also try and reduce the whole biomedical focus and the human focus, try and narrow that gap so people start to see you as a person, not just diabetes or vasculitis. And most importantly, empower people to feel in control with their health and use creativity more as part of their self-management. This is a bit of a, I was wondering whether I should share this or not, but it's just, these are just my thoughts and what I really want to do with my art, but mostly, as I'm doing here with you today, connecting and sharing with various different groups to highlight what it's like to live with a long-term condition, those hidden challenges that we all know we go through, but not always easy to talk to people about. So moving on from that, how can art influence, inspire, and enable change? So I think everything that I've said so far, I've been trying to capture the invisible, to make it visible, etc., by trying to communicate a wider perspective of what's happening with art and highlight the impact of facilitating expressions of illness. Certainly when it comes to showing those expressions to healthcare providers, hopefully they could get a deeper understanding of the impact the illness can have on a person and their lifestyle, as well as understand certain influences and issues people go through, how people respond to pain. There are cultural variations, and I guess there are various other influences that people don't talk about, and perhaps art is a way of bringing all of those issues out and show people what it is like to live with an illness on a day-to-day basis, make sense of it, the whole complexity and the multifactorial nature of it. This is just my interpretation of what my brain is like on a day-to-day basis, all the chaos that is going on, and hopefully by communicating what the everyday is like to others, perhaps can help them, as I mentioned before, change attitudes and perceptions around illness and hopefully evoke some level of change. As we all know, the whole journey, the lived experience can be such a draining encounter. And again, if people get to know what that journey is really like and how important it is to regain a sense of control, then they perhaps can change their attitudes and perceptions around illness, and also how important it is to have a very good support network because going through all these challenges is not easy alone, and it makes such a difference to have a very good support network, and highlighting all these issues perhaps can evoke change. Lastly, to say that art is something that is freely available to anyone. It breaks down all barriers. So I think it is something that anyone, irrespective of what culture or religion or country you belong to, anyone can use it. And it also helps you to reflect, develop yourself, look at yourself in a different way. So the possibilities of learning from it are endless, and given the opportunity, I think art can certainly influence, inspire, and enable individual as well as collective change. And I wanted to share this piece by Frida Kahlo called The Broken Column, where she's drawn her reality here, but there are tears, but she's still empowered, and it just shows the strength in her while going through all this severe pain. And of course, I wanted to share something she said. I never paint dreams or nightmares, I paint my reality. So lastly, I'm going to stop sharing the screen for a second and ask whether anyone has any questions at this point.
I think we're so involved with you, Shanali. We're so listening and lapping it all up. And he just thought of asking people to put questions in there, so maybe you keep going. Yeah.
Don't worry. This is my last. This is my last slide. I want you to have a think about it, because earlier I said if you think of when you think of change, what color comes to your mind? And here I'm just putting it out to you, whether accepting pain or change visually can be helpful in terms of when you visualize something, the whole process and concept of pain. So you put a color and shape to it. Pain is something that's invisible, and so is change or any other feeling. And if you put a color, the moment you put a color and shape to it, you give it a form and a structure, and that makes it more visible. And by doing that, by making it more visible, will it give you, the person who's drawn it, a better idea of how you perceive your own pain or change? And also for the person who's observing it, whether it's your friends, family, or health provider, would it give them a different picture of what the pain and change you're going through? And if that was the case, adding this extra, sensory dimension, could it become more impactful when it comes to patient-clinician dialogue, and help to see the person behind the illness with the many dimensions? And I would be very interested to hear your thoughts, if you have any thoughts or opinions on this.
We've got a few comments there, Shanali, which you might be able to pick up there. Can you see? I know I can. Oh.
Have I got to stop sharing to see it?
I don't think so.
So if you go down to the bottom of your screen, you should see the chat feature, and if you click on the chat,
got you. got you. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't see any of this. I'm really sorry.
No, they've just come up, Shanali. They've just come up after I asked people to put in any questions. So we were so engaged with you. And I think from the comments, it's showing that we were so engaged with such interesting concepts, and the visuals are amazing, and how much as a patient we can relate to all the points you're speaking about, emotion and acceptance. Not just the physical, the emotional side, and it's a way of tools for how to express how others may see you, not as well. I think that was an important point for me personally.
Yeah, yes, that's right. I'm sorry, I'm trying to scroll through it and doing all sorts of.
Yeah.
I'm not.
You want me to read them?
Yes, please, because
yeah. Okay, I'll go from the beginning. So very interesting. Thank you. Oh, Kathy asks, how do you start doing digital art?
That's a very good question. In the beginning, you know how I don't know whether any of you use Viber. It has a doodle function. So I think it must have been 2015, that sort of time, 2014, 2015, when I was texting people, I started just using the doodle function on it. And it had silly things like stars and lips. And I just started to draw on it. And then that's how I started. And then there was an app on my phone called Sketch. And I started to then put color and shape and started to do that. But if not today, but I'd be very happy to do to go through a demonstration at any other time if people were interested.
That's what I was thinking as well as you were talking, Shanali.
Yeah.
That might be a super tool. And sometimes it's not till we experience, you think, oh, maybe art's not for me, but I know for myself as well that, it's when you just give it a go, you realize the value in it. So we'll see what we come back with. The other comments from Jim, he said, very interesting and helpful. Thank you. Nikki Priest says, I would imagine my pain being red for being angry and spiky. Also red for the burning pain.
Yeah.
That is difficult, Nikki, for you. Marion says, you've articulated so well the subjective impact of illness and the struggle. I'm wondering, had you engage in artwork before you fell ill?
Well, yes, not anything like this. This kind of abstract drawing and digital stuff is all new, but I have always been partial to art. I used to do pencil drawings and watercolors and that sort of thing. So yes, I will have to say I was biased towards the arts in general. So that perhaps had an influence.
That was you were slanting towards that. Yeah. So Mary Trey says, very interesting session. Glad you mentioned cooking and gardening, as they are my creative outlets. So.
Totally. Yes.
And of course, cooking and gardening, they're visual as well. The results, they're a visual. And I was thinking, that's so useful. We've been doing a lot of listening. We're online and we have a lot of listening to do these days. So it's important that we, the beautiful colours we can see in your art, and what's within the art is fantastic. Jim McGrath says, the idea of right pain for pain and art for me means instant access to pain relief. Sorry, right brain. He must be his strength is on the right brain side, I think you mean, Jim. Then from our team, you're such a strong woman, an inspiration. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Dajana sends love your art, Shanali. Thanks so much. Vivian says, inspiring talk, a wonderful way to slow down the negative talk that goes on in all our heads. So those are it's all great. So happy that you've been able to make today with us, Shanali. There's anything you want to close off on there yourself, or?
Yes, thank you very much for listening. And it was just the fact that if anyone wants to, I can send this as a Google document to you. And if anyone wants to have any comments later on about accepting pain and change, what their thoughts are, if anyone was interested, we can follow that up.
Lovely. That is fantastic, Shanali. And we'll be posting onto website the art as well, so when we get our new website up and running. So I think we'll close it up there unless anybody else wants to say any more.
Well, thank you very much for listening.
Thank you, Shanali.